Welcome to a space where movement is not rushed, but it is also not resisted, where alignment is valued above comfort, and where obedience is not confused with endurance. There is a dangerous misunderstanding that has quietly shaped many lives: the belief that staying longer is always a sign of faithfulness, that holding on proves commitment, and that leaving means failure. But there are moments when what once carried life no longer does, when what once felt supported begins to feel strained, and when what once flowed with ease now requires constant effort to maintain. These moments are not random, they are signals. There is a point in every assignment where grace shifts. What once felt natural begins to feel forced. What once produced fruit begins to produce fatigue. This is the architecture of an expired season. It does not collapse all at once. It slowly loses its ability to sustain. The signs are subtle at first: a growing sense of resistance, a quiet loss of clarity, a feeling that something is no longer aligned. Many ignore these signals, assuming they are tests of endurance, believing that pushing harder will restore what has already ended. But when a season expires, effort cannot revive it. In Ecclesiastes 3:1 is written that there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under heaven. This includes a time to begin and a time to end. Ignoring the ending does not preserve the season, it distorts it. What was once supported becomes strained. What was once clear becomes confusing. This is not because the environment has suddenly turned against you, but because its purpose in your life has been completed. When you remain beyond that point, a different kind of atmosphere begins to form. The air becomes stale. The same actions that once felt meaningful now feel repetitive and empty. The same connections that once brought clarity now feel draining. This is the beginning of internal decay, not dramatic, but gradual. It shows up as subtle frustration, unexplained fatigue, and a growing sense of disconnection. Over time, this turns into resentment, not only toward the environment, but toward the very things that once felt like purpose. This is one of the clearest indicators that something has shifted. When what once brought life begins to produce tension, it is not always a sign to push harder. Sometimes it is a sign to move. In Isaiah 43:19, there is a reminder that something new is being done, but it requires perception. If the focus remains fixed on what was, it becomes difficult to recognize what is emerging. The longer you remain in an expired season, the more energy is required to sustain it. This is where the concept of a soul leak becomes visible. Your effort increases, but your return decreases. You invest more time, more attention, and more emotional energy, yet the outcome remains minimal. This creates a sense of depletion, where you feel constantly drained without clear reason. It is not that you lack discipline or commitment. It is that you are pouring into something that no longer has the capacity to receive. Resistance begins to show up externally as well. Obstacles increase, not as random challenges, but as indicators of misalignment. Doors that once opened easily begin to close. Conversations become strained. Progress slows despite increased effort. These are often interpreted as opposition to overcome, but not all resistance is meant to be fought. Some resistance is directional. It is designed to redirect rather than test endurance. This is where discernment becomes critical. There is a difference between a trial that develops strength and a condition that signals misalignment. A trial produces growth even in difficulty. There is a sense of purpose within the struggle. But misalignment produces confusion without clarity. It feels like movement without direction, effort without outcome. Understanding this distinction prevents unnecessary exhaustion. In Genesis 12:1, there is a clear instruction given to leave what is familiar and move toward what is not yet visible. The challenge in this moment is not the instruction itself, but the willingness to follow it without full understanding. The familiar, even when it becomes uncomfortable, still feels safer than the unknown. This is where the cost of staying becomes hidden. It feels easier to remain where you are than to step into uncertainty, but that ease is temporary. Comfort can become counterfeit. It mimics stability while quietly limiting growth. It provides familiarity but removes progression. Over time, it becomes a containment rather than a support. The longer you remain in this state, the more difficult it becomes to recognize the difference between stability and stagnation. What once felt like a foundation becomes a boundary. There is also an emotional attachment that forms around roles, identities, and environments. You begin to associate your sense of self with where you are and what you do. Leaving then feels like losing a part of yourself. This attachment makes it harder to move, even when the signs are clear. It creates a loop where you seek validation from the same environment that no longer supports your growth. This prolongs the cycle and deepens the sense of being stuck. In Luke 9:62, there is a statement about not looking back once the decision to move forward has been made. This is not about ignoring the past, but about not allowing it to anchor you when it is time to move. Holding on to what has already served its purpose prevents you from stepping into what is next. The cost of staying is not always immediate, but it accumulates. Opportunities are delayed, clarity is reduced, energy is depleted. What could have been a smooth transition becomes a prolonged struggle. This is not because the next step is unavailable, but because attention remains fixed on what has already been completed. The process of leaving requires a different mindset. It is not about abandoning responsibility, but about recognizing completion. It is understanding that moving on is not failure, but progression. In Philippians 3 verse 13-14, there is an emphasis on forgetting what is behind and pressing forward. This forward movement is not forced, it is intentional. A practical step in this process is to conduct an internal audit. Identify where your energy is producing results and where it is producing fatigue. Notice where there is clarity and where there is confusion. Pay attention to what feels aligned and what feels forced. This is not about making impulsive decisions, but about recognizing patterns that have been consistent over time. Once this awareness is established, the next step is release. Release is not always a single moment. It can be a process of gradually detaching from what is no longer aligned. It involves shifting focus, reducing unnecessary effort, and preparing for movement. This creates space for new direction to become visible. Stepping into the unknown is often the most challenging part. It requires trust without immediate confirmation. It requires moving without a fully defined outcome. But this is where alignment is restored. The void that follows release is not empty. It is a space where new instruction becomes clear. Remaining in that space without rushing to fill it allows for proper direction to emerge. This is the pattern that leads to progression. Not constant movement, but timely movement. Not forced change, but aligned transition. It is recognizing that every season has a purpose, and once that purpose is fulfilled, staying beyond it creates more strain than stability. This is the call of the worldwide truth ecumenical movement, to move with awareness, to recognize the difference between endurance and misalignment, and to understand that obedience is not always about staying, but sometimes about leaving. It is a call to trust that what is ahead is not random, but prepared, and that release is not loss, but transition. If you sense that you are holding on to something that has already completed its purpose, do not ignore that awareness. Take the time to understand it. Be willing to release what is familiar in order to align with what is next. Because remaining where you are no longer meant to be, will always cost more than moving forward into what is prepared. Thank you for standing with the Worldwide Truth Ecumenical Movement. Remain sensitive to alignment, willing to move when it is time, and grounded in the understanding that every transition is part of a greater process of restoration and clarity.